The war room of Titan AI systems erupted in digital chaos. Every monitor across 40 workstations flashed crimson warnings, a synchronized heartbeat of catastrophic failure. Rachel Morgan stood at the center of the storm, her Louboutin heels rooted to the polished floor, while $680 million in artificial intelligence infrastructure collapsed around her. The air tasted of panic and recycled air conditioning, sharp enough to cut. Board members flooded her phone with demands she couldn't answer. Investors threatened to pull funding by morning, their voices shrill through the speaker she'd muted 3 minutes ago. Her elite engineering team shouted over each other, fingers flying across keyboards that mocked their desperation with error messages propagating faster than they could read. Bank of America's systems were down. Delta Airlines couldn't process reservations. Walmart's inventory management had frozen mid-transaction across 2,000 stores. The penalty clause sat heavy in Rachel's mind. $50 million per day of downtime. 3 days maximum before clients could terminate contracts without recourse. Every second that ticked past was another $1,000 evaporating into the Minnesota winter night. In that precise moment of maximum catastrophe, the door to the war room swung open. Marcus Hayes pushed his janitorial cart through the threshold, the wheels squeaking against the tile with a sound that somehow cut through the chaos. His phone was propped against the cleaning supplies, screen glowing with the face of a 6-year-old girl who smiled at flashing lights she couldn't understand. The cart's handle was covered in stickers, stars and rockets, and cartoon animals applied with the careful attention only a child could muster. Rachel's composure shattered. Every ounce of terror she'd been containing for the past 43 minutes transmuted into rage with a target she could actually hurt. She spun toward the intruder, her designer suit immaculate despite the apocalypse, her eyes holding the particular contempt that power reserves for those it considers beneath notice. The words came out ice sharp. "What are you doing here?" Marcus Hayes woke at 4:45 on a Wednesday morning to darkness and the familiar symphony of poverty trying to hold itself together. The radiator in his one-bedroom apartment clanked its morning protest against negative 15-degree cold, metal expanding in reluctant duty. Frost had crawled across the single window that overlooked the parking lot of Riverside Apartments in St. Paul, creating patterns that looked almost beautiful if he didn't think too hard about the heating bill. He moved through shadows with practiced silence, navigating around furniture he could identify by memory alone. The kitchen occupied one corner of the main room, separated from the sleeping area by a bookshelf he'd built 3 years ago from wood salvaged behind a construction site. Every surface gleamed despite appliances that predated his daughter's birth, and linoleum cracked in a spiderweb pattern near the sink. Marcus had learned that dignity lived in details, in how a man kept his space when the world assumed he'd surrendered to circumstances, in the precision of folded dish towels and the absence of dirty dishes in a sink that had seen better decades. He started the coffee maker, a thrift store find that required a specific sequence of button presses. Power, brew, power again, then brew twice more. The machine groaned to life with sounds that suggested each pot might be its last. While it labored, he pulled eggs and bread from a refrigerator decorated with Lily's artwork. Stick figures holding hands dominated most drawings, always one tall and one small beneath yellow suns or inside houses with triangular roofs. No mother figure appeared in any of them. Lily had been 3 when Emily died, too young for concrete memories, old enough to sense the absence like a phantom limb she'd never actually possessed. Marcus cracked eggs into a pan, the sizzle filling the apartment with normalcy he'd carefully constructed over 5 years of single parenthood. His mind cataloged the day ahead with the mechanical efficiency of someone who couldn't afford surprise. Morning shift at Titan AI Technologies, 6:30 to 3, then a 4-hour gap before his evening delivery route started at 7. In between, he'd pick Lily up from after-school care, help with homework at the public library where the heating worked better than his apartment, maybe let her pick one book from the sale shelf if tips had been good. The stack of bills on the kitchen table caught the first gray light seeping through frost-covered windows. Medical debt from Emily's final months, when insurance had covered less each day while the hospital demanded more. Student loans from his abandoned doctoral program, deferred but never forgiven, accumulating interest that had long since doubled the principal. Marcus had done the math countless times with the precision his Berkeley education had instilled. He knew exactly how many years of double shifts lay between him and solvency. 14 years, 2 months, assuming no emergencies. He never complained because complaint required energy better spent on keeping Lily fed and safe and believing her father was capable of anything. Because she needed a father who moved forward, not one who drowned in might-have-beens in the weight of a brilliant career abandoned for love and grief. The photo on the bookshelf showed Emily in the hospital, hours before delivery, her smile radiant despite the cancer already spreading through her lymph nodes. She'd insisted on that photo, insisted Marcus take it even though his hands were shaking and his vision blurred with tears he wouldn't let fall until she slept. Next to it sat their wedding photo from 7 years ago, both of them impossibly young and convinced the future held nothing but promise. Marcus touched neither frame. That was a rule. Touch them and he'd break, and breaking meant Lily would see, and Lily seeing meant questions he still didn't have good answers for. Footsteps padded across the worn carpet. Lily appeared in the doorway, 6 years old with blonde hair tangled from sleep and eyes still heavy with dreams. She clutched the stuffed elephant that had belonged to her mother, the one possession Emily had managed to buy between diagnosis and the rapid deterioration that followed. The elephant's name was Peanut, chosen by a dying woman with enough sense of humor left to make her husband laugh even as his world collapsed. "Morning, sweetheart." Lily climbed onto her chair with the careful deliberation of someone fully awake despite appearances. She studied the eggs Marcus slid onto her plate with exaggerated seriousness, a ritual they'd developed over years of breakfast negotiations. "These are acceptable, Daddy." Marcus poured himself coffee, the first sip always the best regardless of how many shortcuts the thrift store machine took. These minutes before the world demanded its pound of flesh were his favorite. Watching his daughter exist in the space between sleep and full consciousness, her face still soft with whatever dreams 6-year-olds had. "Can I come to work with you today?" she asked every morning. School made this impossible, but persistence was Lily's defining trait, inherited from a mother who'd fought cancer with stubbornness that almost worked. "You've got Mrs. Henderson's class, remember? And that reading assignment about the cat who wore hats." Lily sighed with theatrical disappointment that would have made Emily proud. "But you'll call me when you're cleaning, so I can see the big computers?" Their ritual. Marcus would FaceTime during his lunch break, angle the phone to show gleaming corridors and server rooms that hummed with technology Lily insisted meant he worked in a spaceship. She'd never seen the actual work. Mopping floors, emptying trash, scrubbing toilets used by people who earned in a month what he made in a year. The spaceship illusion mattered more than accuracy. Promise. Right at 11:30. Before leaving, Lily insisted on helping prepare his janitorial cart. She decorated it over the past year with stickers purchased from her allowance, 25 cents a week for completed chores. Stars and rockets covered the handle. Cartoon animals marched along the sides. A golden sun with a smiling face had been added yesterday, pressed on with the solemnity of someone performing surgery. "So everyone knows you're special, Daddy." Marcus knelt to accept her hug, breathing in strawberry shampoo from the dollar store, storing this moment against the hours ahead. What no one at Titan AI suspected, what his personnel files certainly didn't reflect, was that Marcus Hayes had once stood on the other side of the divide between invisible and essential. 7 years ago, he'd been a third-year doctoral candidate in machine learning at UC Berkeley. His dissertation research on recursive learning architectures had earned attention from labs across Silicon Valley. 5 papers published in peer-reviewed journals before completing his third year, a rate that had his advisor calling him the most promising student in a decade. MIT had made offers. Stanford had sent recruiters. The future had looked like something worth reaching for. Then Emily got pregnant, and 3 months later, the doctors found stage 4 lymphoma spreading faster than treatments could contain. Marcus took leave that became permanent. His career dissolved into caring for a dying wife and an infant daughter who arrived 6 weeks premature, but healthy enough to survive what her mother could not. After Emily's death, he tried returning to Berkeley, tried focusing on equations and algorithms. While Lily screamed for attention, he was the only one left to provide. No family remained to help. His parents had died in a car accident when he was 20. Emily's family had cut her off years before for marrying someone they considered beneath their Dallas oil money standards. The decision to leave Berkeley hadn't felt like a decision at all, more like gravity, pulling him toward the only choice that mattered. He'd moved to Minnesota for the lower cost of living, found the cheapest apartment that wasn't actively dangerous, and took the first job offered. Janitor at Titan AI Technologies. Minimum wage. Night shift back then, until Lily started school and he'd beg for days. 3 years had passed. Then 4, then 5. Temporary had become permanent, and brilliant had become invisible. Titan AI Systems occupied a glass and steel tower in downtown Minneapolis, the kind of building designed to intimidate anyone who approached without the right credentials. Marcus arrived at 6:30, parking his 2008 Honda Civic in the employee lot where dents and rust spots marked it as distinctly not belonging. The bumper sticker Lily had insisted on, "My kid is an honor student at Lincoln Elementary," felt like defiance in a lot full of Teslas and BMWs. Tom Rodriguez worked the security desk, a 53-year-old veteran who'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan before deciding he had had enough of being shot at for inadequate pay. He looked up when Marcus entered through the service entrance, offering the kind of smile that suggested actual recognition, rather than the performance most people gave service workers. "Morning, Marcus. Cold one today. -15 last I checked." Tom poured coffee from his thermos into a second cup he kept specifically for this purpose, sliding it across the desk. Marcus accepted with gratitude that had nothing to do with caffeine and everything to do with being seen as human. "How's Lily doing? Growing too fast. Wants a puppy for her birthday next month." Tom chuckled, the sound genuine. "Kids. My grandson's the same. Wants a python. His mother's ready to disown me for even mentioning it." They talked for 3 more minutes about things that mattered. Family, the Vikings' playoff chances, whether the winter would break before April. Then Marcus collected his cart from the maintenance room and began his route through a building designed to keep people like him separate from people who mattered. Executives arrived through the main lobby, their coats designer labels, and their expressions broadcasting importance. Marcus entered through the service entrance, took the freight elevator, moved through corridors that existed behind the scenes. 2 Americas occupied the same building, separated by doors marked authorized personnel only, that he was authorized to clean but never truly enter. Titan AI had been founded 8 years ago by Rachel Morgan, a Stanford dropout who'd built the company's flagship product from her dorm room. Apollo AI revolutionized enterprise automation, replacing human decision-making with algorithms that process data faster than any team of analysts. The company now employed 800 people, held a valuation of $2.3 billion, and had an IPO planned for the second quarter. Rachel Morgan's reputation preceded her through every conversation Marcus overheard while emptying trash. Brilliant but ruthless, demanding perfection while accepting nothing less than total devotion. Someone who worked 100-hour weeks and expected her employees to match that commitment or find employment elsewhere. Marcus's morning route took him through the engineering department, where developers arrived early to claim the best standing desks and closest parking to the espresso machine. He moved among them like a ghost, emptying trash bins while they discussed problems he understood completely, but would never acknowledge understanding. This morning, a cluster of engineers stood near the break room, voices tight with frustration over a technical issue in Apollo's latest update. Brad Morrison, 28, Harvard PhD, 2 years at Google before Titan recruited him, was explaining why the neural pathway initialization kept failing during stress tests. "It's like the system's calling itself before it exists. Circular dependency, maybe. But I've traced the architecture and can't find where the loop originates." Marcus emptied the trash can 3 feet away, perfectly positioned to see the error logs Brad had pulled up on his tablet. The problem screamed at him from the code, clear as a spelling mistake. Recursive function referencing variables not yet initialized, creating infinite regress during high-load scenarios. He'd written a paper on this exact failure mode during his second year at Berkeley. The solution required restructuring the initialization sequence, establishing base parameters before allowing any recursive calls. Brad noticed him and made a joke to the other engineers, something about how maybe they should let the janitor take a crack at it since their PhDs weren't helping. Laughter followed, not cruel but not kind either. The kind of dismissal that came from never imagining the person emptying your trash might once have been your peer. Marcus smiled, said nothing, and moved to the next office. Speaking would mean exposure. Exposure would mean questions. Questions would lead to his past, and his past would threaten the fragile stability Lily needed. Better to stay invisible, stay safe, keep collecting a paycheck that barely covered rent, but at least was reliable. Rachel Morgan arrived at her office at 5:30 in the morning, 90 minutes before most of her executive team and 3 hours before the developers. She'd been awake since 4, finishing a Peloton session that left her muscles burning and her mind sharp. Sleep felt like surrender to a body that would slow her down if given the chance. The executive floor occupied the building's top 3 stories, floor-to-ceiling windows, offering views of Minneapolis that cost more per square foot than most people's mortgages. Rachel's corner office could have housed a family of 4 comfortably. Instead, it held a desk made from reclaimed airplane wing, chairs that cost more than Marcus's monthly salary, and exactly 0 personal items that might suggest a life beyond these walls. She reviewed quarterly projections while drinking coffee her assistant had prepared the night before. Temperature and foam ratio calibrated to preferences Rachel had never needed to state twice. The numbers looked good. Apollo AI had exceeded targets in 14 of the past 16 quarters. Client retention sat at 93%. Revenue growth continued its upward trajectory, but the board wanted more. They always wanted more. Harrison Blake, the venture capitalist who'd invested $50 million in Titan Series B, had been making noise about leadership stability, about whether a 32-year-old CEO could handle the pressures of taking a company public, about experienced guidance and proven track records, which translated to installing some 50-year-old male executive who'd failed upward through 3 previous startups. Rachel had built Titan from nothing. She'd written the first version of Apollo in her Stanford dorm room after dropping out when professors told her the ideas were too ambitious, too complex, too unrealistic for someone her age to execute. She'd proven them wrong with obsessive dedication that left no room for relationships or rest or anything resembling normal human connection. The 6 a.m. executive meeting featured Rachel demolishing her VP of sales for missing quarterly targets by 3%. She delivered the criticism in voice that could cut glass, each word precisely chosen to wound while maintaining professional distance. The VP left looking like he'd been physically struck. After the meeting, Maya Chen, her executive assistant, 27, Stanford MBA, the only person who had lasted more than 18 months in the role, tried making small talk about the weather. "I don't pay you to chat, Maya. I pay you for competence." Maya's face flickered with hurt before professional mask descended. She left without another word. Rachel sat alone in her office, looking out at Minneapolis skyline through windows that somehow made the city feel further away rather than closer. The cruelty had been unnecessary. She knew this. Knew also that she couldn't seem to stop. Couldn't find the switch that would make her capable of basic kindness when kindness felt like weakness, and weakness meant removal. Her phone showed no personal messages. No texts from friends because she'd systematically alienated anyone who'd tried getting close. No calls from family because her sister hadn't spoken to her in 3 years, not since Rachel had missed her nephew's birth for a board meeting she couldn't reschedule. The last personal call had been from David 2 years ago, the tech CEO she'd been engaged to for 6 months. He'd called to end things after she'd canceled their wedding planning session for the 4th consecutive week. His words still echoed sometimes in quiet moments she usually managed to avoid. "You're married to Titan, Rachel, not to me. You'll never be married to anything but success, and I can't compete with that." She'd told herself she didn't care. Told herself that David's inability to understand her drive meant he wasn't worthy of her time. Told herself that success was what mattered, that building something meaningful required sacrifices people without vision couldn't comprehend. The truth, which she admitted only in moments like this when isolation felt physical, was that it had broken something inside her she didn't know how to fix, that she was lonely in ways that terrified her, that she'd built an empire of algorithms and automation but couldn't program herself to feel connected to another human being. She whispered it to the empty office, words that cost her nothing because no one was there to hear. This is what success costs. The crisis began at 2:43 on a Wednesday afternoon that had seemed unremarkable until the first alarm started screaming. Marcus was cleaning the executive floor, running a microfiber cloth over windows that offered million-dollar views to people who rarely looked at them. The first sound that registered was digital, a shriek that cut through the building's ambient noise like a knife through silk. Monitors in every visible office flashed red. Engineers sprinted toward the war room with expressions Marcus recognized from his Berkeley days, when experiments failed catastrophically and professors demanded explanations that didn't exist. He followed out of curiosity that had survived 5 years of forced invisibility, pushing his cart into a corner near the war room entrance where he could observe without obstructing. The scene inside resembled a disaster film. 40 engineers packed into a space designed for 20, shouting over each other while monitors displayed cascading error messages in aggressive crimson. Status boards showed Apollo AI systems failing across 15 Fortune 500 clients in real time. Bank of America's transaction processing frozen. Delta Airlines reservation systems offline. Walmart's inventory management collapsing across every store in their network. Rachel Morgan commanded the center of the chaos, her voice cutting through noise with practiced authority that suggested this wasn't her first crisis but might be her last if solutions didn't materialize. She demanded explanations no one could provide, threatened consequences everyone feared. The dollar figures being thrown around made Marcus's yearly salary seem like pocket change. $680 million in committed contracts, $50 million per day in penalty clauses, 3 days until clients could terminate without recourse. Marcus watched engineers argue, their technical shorthand automatically parsing in his mind despite 5 years of deliberate suppression. They were looking in wrong places, chasing symptoms rather than root causes. The error pattern pointed clearly to a recursive loop failure in the neural pathway initialization, something he'd written about extensively during his Berkeley years. The kind of elegant mistake that looked correct until traced through multiple iterations. The solution took shape in his mind with the inevitability of mathematics. 3 lines of code needed changing. Restructure the initialization sequence to establish base parameters before recursive calls began. Simple, obvious, exactly the problem his dissertation research had addressed. But speaking meant exposure. Exposure meant questions. Questions meant his past would collide with his present in ways that could destroy the fragile stability Lily depended on. His job was emptying trash cans. His job was invisibility. His job was protecting his daughter from instability that came from being noticed. His phone buzzed with Lily's scheduled call, her face appearing on screen with the brightness that made everything else fade into background noise. She wanted to see the spaceship computers like he'd promised, and Marcus angled the phone to show her blinking lights and people who looked appropriately busy. Lily noticed the distress surrounding him, concern crossing her 6-year-old face. "Why are they sad, Daddy?" Marcus explained that the computers were sick and people were trying to help them feel better. "Can't you help them? You told me you used to teach computers things before Mommy got sick." The engineers nearby overheard, their attention snagged on the absurdity of a janitor's daughter suggesting he could solve their crisis. Laughter rippled through the room, cruel in its exhaustion rather than malice. Brad Morrison turned toward the sound, recognized Marcus with his decorated cart and phone displaying a child's face. "Out of the mouths of babes, right? Maybe we should let the janitor have a crack at it." More laughter followed. Victoria seized on this moment with predator instincts that came from years of channeling fear into aggression. She crossed to where Marcus stood, her designer suit immaculate despite the chaos, her eyes holding contempt that power reserves for powerlessness. "Your daughter thinks you can help. By all means, enlighten us." She gestured toward the central monitor, displaying error logs that scrolled past faster than human reading speed. "Tell me, what do you see when you look at this screen?" The challenge hung in air thick with the smell of anxiety and recycled air. Rachel expected stammering embarrassment, expected Marcus to reveal himself as nothing more than what his job title suggested, expected confirmation of every assumption she'd built her worldview around, that success proved worth, that failure proved weakness, that the hierarchy separating her from the janitor reflected natural order rather than circumstance and luck. Marcus looked at the screen. The recursive loop failure screamed at him from the error logs, clear as a misspelled word in a language everyone else had somehow forgotten. He could remain silent, accept mockery, preserve invisibility, protect Lily from the instability that came from being his daughter when people learned what he'd abandoned. But Lily was watching waiting to see what her father would do. Lily, who believed he could do anything, who trusted him with faith so absolute it sometimes terrified him. Lily, who'd asked the question that had put him in this position because she believed her father was someone worth believing in. Her voice came through the phone speaker, bright with the certainty only children possessed before the world taught them doubt. Daddy always says being brave isn't not being scared. Being brave is doing the right thing even when you're scared. His own words, offered during a thunderstorm when she'd crawled into his bed trembling, now reflected back at him as a mirror showing what she needed him to be. Not perfect, not fearless, just brave enough to act despite terror clawing at his throat. Marcus spoke quietly, his voice cutting through the noise with the clarity of someone who knew exactly what he was talking about. The cascade originates in your memory allocation subroutine. You've created a circular dependency in the neural pathway initialization. The system calls a function that references itself before completion, creating infinite regress that overwhelms buffer capacity. He paused while the room went silent, engineers processing what he'd just said with expressions ranging from confusion to dawning recognition. You need to restructure the initialization sequence to establish base parameters before recursive calls begin. Move the variable initialization to a separate function that completes before the main recursive loop starts. It's a 3-line fix. The silence that followed contained a different quality than mockery. Marcus watched understanding dawn on faces around the room, watched engineers recognize truth in what he'd described. Watched them also recognize the impossibility of a janitor possessing this knowledge unless he was something other than what he appeared to be. Rachel stood frozen, her prepared humiliation reflecting back as confusion mixed with the first stirrings of something that might have been shame. Her world tilted on an axis she hadn't known existed, every assumption she'd built her identity around suddenly questionable. Lily's voice broke through the stillness, impossibly proud of a father who'd just done something she didn't understand but recognized as important. "See, Daddy, I told them you could help." Rachel Morgan did not become CEO of a $2.3 billion company by accepting embarrassment gracefully. The shock of Marcus's diagnosis transformed into defensive fury, a need to reassert dominance in a room where her authority had just been challenged by someone who cleaned her floors. She stepped closer to him, close enough to smell the industrial cleaning solution on his clothes cutting through her Chanel No. 5. Anyone can parrot technical terminology they overheard. Actually, fixing complex systems requires expertise that takes decades to develop. Her eyes swept the room, gathering allies among senior engineers who resented a janitor showing them up, who needed to believe their PhDs and years of experience meant something that job titles validated. If you're so confident, why don't you prove it? Fix the system yourself. The challenge hung like a thrown gauntlet designed to force Marcus into either retreat or more spectacular failure. Rachel was betting $680 million that a janitor couldn't back up words with action, that his diagnosis was lucky guess or overheard conversation rather than actual expertise. Several engineers shifted uncomfortably. Maya Chen, who'd been observing from the doorway, started to object. "Miss Morgan, maybe we should focus on the actual problem." Rachel silenced her with a look that could freeze the Minnesota winter solid. "I'm waiting, unless your expertise ends at description." She pulled cash from her wallet with the deliberate theater of someone making a point. $5,000 in crisp hundreds, fanned like a poker hand. The money represented more than Marcus earned in 2 months, and Rachel knew this, knew exactly what she was doing by making wealth itself part of the weapon. "I'll bet this against your next 2 months' salary that you can't do anything useful." "You're right, you get the money. You're wrong, you're fired, and I'll personally ensure you never work in tech again." The room held its breath. Brad Morrison and his faction wore expressions suggesting they wanted to see Marcus humiliated, wanted confirmation that hierarchy meant something. Tom Chen, the senior engineer who'd been kind during their brief interactions, looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Marcus looked at the $5,000, then the screen, then his phone where Lily watched with eyes that believed her father was capable of anything. The money meant 4 months of after-school care, meant catching up on overdue bills, meant maybe fixing the Honda's transmission before it failed completely. But if he was wrong, if he failed, he'd lose the job that barely sustained them. Lily would lose the stability that let her sleep without nightmares about being taken away by social workers who asked questions about adequate supervision and appropriate living conditions. Lily's voice came through the phone, small but certain. "Daddy, remember what you told me about being brave?" The words were his own, offered during thunderstorms and first days of school, and every moment when fear threatened to paralyze her. Now she was offering them back, teaching him lessons he'd tried teaching her. Marcus handed his phone to Maya Chen, who'd been watching the entire exchange with an expression suggesting she thought her boss had lost her mind. "Could you hold this so my daughter can see?" Maya took the phone carefully, angling it toward the central workstation where 40 engineers and one CEO waited to see if a janitor could save a company or simply destroy himself trying. Marcus approached the keyboard where Rachel stood, and for a moment they were close enough to touch. CEO and janitor, wealth and poverty, pride and dignity, two people separated by everything except the 3 feet of space between them. "I'll need access to the core architecture." Rachel hesitated, some part of her still hoping he'd back down, prove her right, confirm that the world made sense in ways she understood. Then she gestured sharply at Brad Morrison to provide credentials, certain this would end in Marcus's humiliation and her vindication. The login screen gave way to dense walls of code, millions of lines representing years of development by teams who'd never imagined a janitor would be navigating their life's work. Marcus's fingers found the keyboard with muscle memory 5 years hadn't erased, the particular rhythm of coding that had once been natural as breathing. He navigated through directory structures with swift efficiency that made Brad Morrison's expression shift from smugness to confusion. How does he know the architecture? Someone whispered it, the question spreading through the room like contagion. Marcus ignored everything except the screen, drilling down through interface code to the neural network's core initialization routines. The engineers who'd been mocking him minutes before now leaned forward, watching a janitor move through their code with unsettling confidence. Rachel maintained her position beside him, arms crossed, face set in determined skepticism that couldn't quite hide the cracks forming in her certainty. The flaw revealed itself exactly where Marcus predicted, buried in a recursive function that referenced variables not yet instantiated. He could see how it happened, an optimization attempt creating elegant circular dependency, the kind of error that looked correct until traced through multiple iterations, exactly the type of mistake brilliant engineers made when they were too close to their own work to see it clearly. 3 lines needed to change out of millions. Marcus made modifications with precise keystrokes, restructuring initialization to establish base parameters before any recursive calls began. He added comments explaining the fix in language his Berkeley professors would have approved of, then ran preliminary tests to verify the changes wouldn't break anything else. Enter when ready. Rachel's voice betrayed first cracks of uncertainty, the possibility that she'd miscalculated in ways that would haunt her. Marcus verified his changes one final time, thinking about Lily watching through the phone Maya held, thinking about Emily, who'd believed he could do anything if he just had faith in himself, thinking about 5 years of invisible existence about to end regardless of whether he succeeded or failed. He pressed enter. Monitors flickered. Error messages began disappearing like smoke and wind, replaced by the cool blue of successful processes. Status indicators shifted from red to amber to green in a cascade that swept across the war room like dawn, breaking over mountains. Somewhere in the building's depths, servers that had been screaming in digital agony settled into harmonious operation. The chaos of 40 voices shouting over each other gave way to stunned silence that lasted approximately 3 seconds before erupting into celebration. Engineers shouted and embraced, releasing hours of tension in one explosive moment. Maya Chen jumped up and down while holding Marcus's phone, Lily's face on the screen showing delight at whatever this meant. Brad Morrison stood frozen, unable to process what he'd just witnessed. Tom Chen approached Marcus with an expression suggesting his entire worldview had shifted. But Marcus barely noticed the celebration. His attention remained fixed on Rachel, watching her face cycle through shock, disbelief, and something darker. The first recognition of what she'd done, who she'd publicly humiliated, and what that said about her judgment and character. She stared at green status lights as if personally betrayed by their success. The $5,000 remained clutched in her hand, forgotten props from drama that hadn't followed expected script. Around her, people praised the janitor who'd saved their project, their jobs, their company's future. Rachel Morgan, who'd built Titan AI through sheer brilliance and force of will, had just been publicly outperformed by a man who emptied her trash cans. Run full diagnostics. I want verification from every department that systems are stable. The command reasserted authority, reminded everyone who held power regardless of who'd performed the miracle. Engineers scattered to stations, but eyes kept returning to Marcus, who'd stepped back from the keyboard and now stood quietly beside his decorated cart. The janitor cart with stickers his daughter had applied because she thought everyone should know her father was special. The diagnostics took 20 minutes. 20 minutes during which Marcus waited in patient silence, while Rachel paced and engineers whispered and the world tried processing what had just happened. When results appeared on the central monitor, the room fell quiet again with different quality of silence. Not mockery or celebration, but something closer to awe, mixed with confusion. Not only had Marcus's fix resolved the cascading failure, but his restructured initialization had improved overall system efficiency by 18%. Processes requiring 12 seconds now completed in 10. Memory usage had dropped by 22%. The janitor had not merely saved their project, he'd made it significantly better than their entire engineering team had managed in 3 years of development. Rachel read the numbers 3 times, certain there must be error in the analysis. But data held firm under every verification. A janitor had walked into her war room and casually outperformed every Stanford and MIT graduate on her payroll. A man she'd publicly humiliated possessed skills that apparently exceeded her own. The implications threatened everything she'd built her identity around. Tom Chen approached Marcus with undisguised awe, abandoning professional distance for honest amazement. Where did you learn? He couldn't complete the question, couldn't bridge the gap between janitor and virtuoso, between what Marcus appeared to be and what he'd just proven himself to be. Marcus offered a slight shrug that deflected rather than explained. Lucky guess. Sometimes fresh eyes help. The modest words convinced no one. Engineers had spent years developing Apollo, lived inside its code like a second language, and none had seen what Marcus saw in minutes. Brad Morrison stared at him with expression suggesting his entire understanding of merit and hierarchy had just been demolished. Maya Chen smiled while holding the phone, recognizing something others were too shocked to process. Rachel watched the exchange with expression unreadable even to herself. The $5,000 had disappeared back into her wallet, bet unfulfilled by mutual unspoken consent. When Marcus retrieved his phone and told Lily he'd call her after work, Rachel made no move to stop him. She simply watched as the janitor collected his cart and wheeled it toward the door as if nothing remarkable had happened. As if he hadn't just saved $680 million and exposed every assumption she'd based her life on as potentially worthless. The door closed behind him. The war room gradually emptied as engineers returned to workstations, conversations already shifting to speculation about who Marcus really was. Rachel remained in her office long after most staff went home, staring at personnel files on her laptop with obsessive focus that had built her company but destroyed her personal life. Marcus Hayes, employee number 7442, hired 5 years ago for janitorial services, listed education, high school diploma, emergency contact, Lily Hayes, daughter age 6, previous employment, delivery driver, warehouse worker, retail stock clerk. Nothing in his file explained what she'd witnessed. Nothing suggested capability that had just saved her company. She began searching beyond company records, driven by need to understand that felt almost physical. The first hint came from an old UC Berkeley alumni newsletter buried in Google results, a brief mention of promising doctoral candidates in machine learning. Marcus Hayes had published 4 papers in peer-reviewed journals before completing his 3rd year, an exceptional rate that attracted attention from major tech firms. Rachel found breadcrumbs scattered across academic databases, conference presentations at NeurIPS and ICML, venues where only serious researchers presented, citation records showing his work referenced 847 times by other scholars, a dissertation proposal that reviewers had called groundbreaking, potentially paradigm-shifting in how neural networks could be optimized through recursive learning architectures. Then nothing. Abrupt end to a stellar career coinciding with dates that deeper searching connected to an obituary for Emily Hayes, beloved wife and mother taken too soon at age 28, survived by husband Marcus and daughter Lily, age 3. Rachel sat in darkness as the full picture assembled itself with the inevitability of mathematics. The janitor cleaning her floors had once been a rising star in her field. The man she'd publicly humiliated possessed expertise matching or exceeding her own. He'd abandoned everything, education, career, future, to care for a dying wife and motherless daughter. He'd fallen from academic heights to service work and visibility without apparent bitterness or desire for recognition. She thought about Lily's face on that phone, absolute confidence declaring her father capable of anything. She thought about Marcus's quiet dignity facing mockery, his refusal to defend himself even while holding knowledge that could devastate his attackers. She thought about $5,000 offered as weapon, about threats of firing and blacklisting, about every casual cruelty she'd inflicted because power made it possible. Something shifted in Rachel's chest, an unfamiliar sensation she eventually identified as shame, pure, undiluted shame at who she'd become and what she'd done. She'd built her career on certainty of superiority, on assumptions that success proved worth and failure proved its absence. Marcus Hayes challenged every premise justifying her treatment of people she considered beneath her. He was brilliant and humble, devastated and functional, invisible by choice rather than limitation. Everything she believed about achievement and value began cracking under the weight of his example, and the person those cracks revealed underneath was someone she barely recognized and didn't particularly like. The measure of a person isn't the mistake, it's what they do after. She whispered it to the empty office, words that cost her nothing because no one was there to hear. But they felt true in ways that terrified her, because they suggested the person she'd been for 32 years might not be the person she wanted to be for whatever time remained. And change, real change, required admitting she'd been wrong about almost everything that mattered. Rachel Morgan remained in her office until Minneapolis turned from dusk to full darkness, the city lights below creating constellations that mocked her isolation. Her laptop screen cast blue light across features that would have looked severe even without the exhaustion pulling at them. The whiskey she'd poured an hour ago sat untouched. Ice melted into dilution that matched how her certainties had dissolved over the past 3 hours. Marcus Hayes' personnel file told her almost nothing. 5 years of employment, perfect attendance record, 0 disciplinary issues. The application he'd submitted listed high school education, previous work in delivery and warehouse positions. Emergency contact. Lily Hayes' daughter. The form had a section for special skills or certifications. Marcus had left it blank. She typed his name into Google with the kind of desperation she'd never admit to anyone who might witness it. The search returned a Berkeley alumni newsletter from 8 years prior, buried on the 3rd page of results, where most people never looked. The article featured promising doctoral candidates in computer science. Marcus Hayes appeared in a photograph with other students, younger than, smiling in a way that suggested he'd known what hope felt like. 3rd-year candidate Marcus Hayes has published 4 papers in peer-reviewed journals, an exceptional rate that has attracted attention from Stanford, MIT, and several Silicon Valley research labs. His dissertation proposal on recursive learning, architectures, and neural networks has been called groundbreaking by committee members who rarely offer such praise. Rachel navigated to academic databases she'd used during her own abbreviated Stanford career. Marcus's papers appeared in journals she recognized, published by researchers she respected. 847 citations. Conference presentations at NeurIPS and ICML, venues that didn't accept work from amateurs or posers. His research had contributed to a field she'd built her company around, and she'd never known his name until today. The dissertation proposal was still accessible through Berkeley's library system. She downloaded it, skimming abstract and methodology with growing comprehension of exactly how qualified Marcus Hayes actually was. The proposal addressed problems that Apollo AI still struggled with, offered solutions her team hadn't conceived. If he'd finished this work, completed his doctorate, He would have been exactly the kind of researcher Titan tried recruiting with six-figure salaries and equity packages. Then the publications stopped. Abruptly. No conference presentations after November 7 years ago. No final dissertation. Just silence where a promising career should have continued. Cross-referencing the timeline led Rachel to an obituary that made her chest tighten in ways she hadn't experienced since her father's death when she was 19. Emily Hayes, beloved wife and mother, passed away at 28 after a courageous battle with lymphoma. Survived by husband Marcus and daughter Lily, age 3. Services were held at a funeral home in Berkeley. In lieu of flowers, donations could be made to cancer research. Rachel sat back from the laptop, assembling the picture with the same analytical precision she applied to business problems. Brilliant doctoral candidate, pregnant wife diagnosed with terminal cancer. Everything abandoned to care for a dying woman and infant daughter. Academic heights to janitorial invisibility in the span of months, driven by circumstances that would have destroyed most people completely. 5 years he'd worked in her building. 5 years of emptying her trash, cleaning her floors, existing in the invisible infrastructure that kept Titan running while she'd never once actually seen him as human. 5 years during which his expertise could have revolutionized her company if she'd been capable of looking past job titles to recognize capability. The shame that hit her was physical, a wave of nausea that made her reach for the whiskey after all. She'd humiliated him, threatened him, bet $5,000 that he couldn't do what he'd proven himself extraordinarily capable of doing. She'd weaponized her wealth and power against a grieving widower who'd sacrificed everything for love, while she'd sacrificed everything for a company that would replace her the moment the board decided she was liability rather than asset. What kind of man possesses brilliance but chooses humility, suffers devastation but emerges with kindness intact? She whispered it to the empty office, then poured the whiskey down her sink because drinking alone at 11 p.m. suggested problems she wasn't ready to acknowledge. But the question lingered, demanding answers she didn't have. Marcus Hayes had every reason to be bitter, angry, eager to prove himself and climb back to the heights he'd fallen from. Instead, he'd chosen invisibility to protect his daughter's stability, had chosen dignity over recognition, had shown more character in his restraint than Rachel had demonstrated in years of ruthless ambition. Her phone showed messages from board members congratulating her on resolving the crisis. Harrison Blake had sent a terse note acknowledging the successful outcome while mentioning they should discuss leadership protocols during the next quarterly review. The implicit threat was clear. He'd been looking for opportunities to question her competence, and a crisis that required a janitor's intervention gave him ammunition he'd use ruthlessly. Rachel composed 3 different emails to Marcus before deleting all of them. Words felt inadequate for what she needed to convey, and electronic communication felt cowardly. If she owed him an apology, and she did, that much was undeniable. It needed to be delivered in person, with the vulnerability that terrified her more than any board meeting or investor presentation. She left her office at midnight, the building mostly empty except for security and the night maintenance crew. Tom Rodriguez waved from his desk, and Rachel found herself wondering if Tom knew about Marcus. If the security guard who she'd never bothered learning the name of until reading it off his badge 6 months ago understood things about her employees that she'd been too self-important to notice. The penthouse apartment she returned to was immaculate and soulless. $4 million of real estate with views that meant nothing when no one shared them. She stood at the window, looking out at Minneapolis, thinking about Marcus in whatever small apartment he could afford on minimum wage. Thinking about Lily, 6 years old, and apparently convinced her father worked in spaceships. Thinking about Emily, who'd loved a brilliant man enough to inspire him to abandon brilliance for devotion. Rachel had never loved anyone like that, had never been loved like that, had never allowed herself to be vulnerable enough for that kind of connection. David had proposed, and she'd said yes, but some essential part of her had remained locked away, where emotions couldn't interfere with ambition. He'd recognized this before she had, ended things before investing more time in someone incapable of reciprocating his devotion. She slept poorly, dreams filled with error messages she couldn't fix, and a 6-year-old's voice asking why the sad lady didn't know how to smile. Morning came too early. Rachel arrived at Titan at 5:30 out of habit, muscle memory driving her through routines that suddenly felt hollow. She watched the parking lot from her office window, tracking Marcus's Honda as it pulled into a spot near the back where dented vehicles congregated. Watched him retrieve his cart from the trunk, the stickers visible even from 40 floors up. Watched him wave to Tom Rodriguez with the easy familiarity of two people who actually saw each other as human. The thought occurred to her that Marcus probably knew Tom's children's names, probably asked about Tom's wife's health or his grandson's baseball games, probably treated the security guard with more genuine warmth than Rachel had shown anyone in years. She waited until Marcus's scheduled lunch break, information gleaned from a personnel schedule she'd never bothered consulting before. 11:30, 30 minutes allotted for a meal he'd bring from home because the cafeteria prices weren't designed for people earning what he earned. Rachel left the executive floor without telling Maya where she was going, descended in the freighted elevator Marcus used daily, navigated corridors she'd never walked in 8 years of owning this building. The maintenance break room occupied basement space near the loading docks, concrete walls and fluorescent lights that hummed with electrical resistance. Marcus sat alone at a table scarred by years of use, eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that looked homemade. A worn paperback lay open beside his lunch. Carl Sagan's Contact, pages yellowed with age and multiple readings. He looked up when she entered, his expression cycling through surprise to wariness. Preparing himself for whatever new humiliation this visit might bring, unable to imagine that a CEO would descend to maintenance level for anything resembling apology. "May I sit?" The question came out more uncertain than Rachel had intended. Marcus gestured to the plastic chair across from him, and she lowered herself carefully, smoothing her skirt against furniture that cost less than her shoes. They sat in silence, two people from opposite ends of society's spectrum, neither certain how to bridge the chasm between them. "I owe you an apology. What I did yesterday was inexcusable." The words felt inadequate even as she spoke them. Marcus watched her with eyes that revealed nothing, giving her no help with this. "I was terrified and overwhelmed. The company was collapsing, and I couldn't fix it, and that scared me more than I knew how to handle. But that doesn't justify how I treated you, how I threatened you, how I used my position and money as weapons." Marcus's expression softened slightly, wariness giving way to something more open. "I understand pressure. I understand making mistakes when everything feels like it's falling apart." His voice held no accusation. He was offering her grace without conditions, showing more generosity than she'd shown anyone in recent memory. The measure of a person isn't the mistake, it's what they do after. Rachel felt something crack in her chest, some carefully maintained wall crumbling under the weight of kindness she didn't deserve. She found herself talking, words spilling out in ways she'd trained herself never to permit. About the board threatening her removal, about investors questioning her leadership, about 3 years poured into Apollo, building something that justified her existence while destroying her ability to connect with anything outside work. Marcus listened with attention that felt complete, asking questions that drew out truths she'd never spoken aloud. About the isolation of being CEO, where showing weakness meant removal and strength meant cutting yourself off from human connection. About building an empire at the cost of everything that actually mattered. "Your daughter clearly believes in you completely." Marcus's face transformed at the mention of Lily, guarded professionalism dissolving into pure paternal warmth that made Rachel ache with something she couldn't name. "She's the reason I get up every morning. Everything else is just details." Rachel nodded slowly, recognizing a priority system she'd never considered, where success meant keeping one 6-year-old girl safe and happy rather than maximizing shareholder value or hitting quarterly targets, where worth was measured in bedtime stories and homework help rather than revenue growth and market dominance. Tom Chen appeared in the doorway, the senior engineer who'd watched yesterday's events with visible discomfort. He carried 2 cups of coffee, offering one to Marcus with the ease of established friendship. "Thought you might need this after yesterday's excitement." "Rachel, I didn't expect to see you down here." The use of her first name from someone she'd never encouraged to familiarity would have annoyed her yesterday. Today it felt like exposure of how far she drifted from basic human interaction. Tom turned back to Marcus. "The team wants to buy you lunch. Thank you for what you did. You taught us more in 20 minutes than most of us learn in years." After Tom left, Rachel and Marcus sat in silence that felt less awkward than contemplative. You don't have to stay invisible anymore. Let me bring you on officially. Use your expertise the way it deserves to be used. Marcus tensed, fear crossing his features. I can't risk Lily's stability. This job is stable. It keeps us fed and housed. That's what matters. Rachel understood then how thoroughly she'd broken his trust. How her threats about ensuring he never worked in tech again had reinforced every fear that kept him hidden. Rebuilding that trust would require more than apologies. It would require proving through action that she'd changed, that she could be someone worth believing in. What would it take for you to trust me? Marcus studied her for a long moment. Time and consistency. Show me you mean what you say, not just today when you're feeling guilty, but next week and next month. Show me you see people as people, not just, hey, assets or obstacles. Rachel nodded, accepting terms that would cost her something more valuable than money. They would cost her the armor she'd built around herself, the distance that protected her from caring too much about outcomes she couldn't control. 2 weeks later, Harrison Blake convened an emergency board call that Rachel joined with growing dread. The venture capitalist's silver hair and shark eyes filled her laptop screen with the predatory satisfaction of someone who'd found weakness to exploit. I'd like to discuss the Apollo crisis and its implications for leadership competency. Rachel kept her expression neutral while her pulse accelerated. The crisis was resolved successfully with minimal client impact. All systems are stable and actually performing better than before. Blake smiled without warmth. Yes, resolved by a janitor, I understand, which raises questions about our engineering team's capabilities and your oversight of technical development. The other board members shifted in their video windows, discomfort visible. Blake was forcing them to choose sides, and Rachel could see the calculations happening behind their eyes. 4 board members had historically supported her. 4 tended to side with Blake. 3 swung between factions, depending on quarterly results and which way the wind blew. I'm glad you brought this up, Harrison. It gives me opportunity to discuss a strategic initiative I'm implementing. We're expanding our talent recognition beyond traditional metrics, creating pathways for exceptional people regardless of their current job titles. Blake's expression suggested he'd expected defensive excuses, not proactive strategy. How progressive. Though I wonder if this initiative stems from forward thinking or from embarrassment that your janitorial staff understands your technology better than your MIT graduates. The barb landed, but Rachel refused to flinch. It stems from recognizing that brilliance appears in unexpected places, that my job is creating conditions where talent can flourish, not maintaining arbitrary hierarchies that prevent people from contributing at their highest level. The meeting ended without resolution, but Blake's message was clear. He was watching for any sign of weakness, any opportunity to argue that Rachel's leadership represented liability rather than asset. The 60-day countdown to the quarterly review began that afternoon. 3 days later, Titan's security team detected a potential data breach, the kind that could expose client information, trigger lawsuits, destroy the IPO before it launched. Rachel convened another war room session, but this time she made a different choice. She descended to the maintenance level personally, found Marcus mopping a corridor on the 3rd floor. I need your help, not as a janitor, as the expert I should have recognized from the beginning. Marcus hesitated, checking his watch. I have to pick up Lily in 40 minutes. Bring her here. We have a conference room she can do homework in. I'll order dinner for both of you. The offer surprised him, Rachel could see. The willingness to accommodate his daughter, rather than demanding he choose between work and parenting. If this takes more than 2 hours, I'm done. She comes first. Rachel met his eyes. She should always come first. Lily Hayes arrived at Titan headquarters with suspicious eyes and a backpack heavy with books. 6 years old, going on 16 in terms of protective instincts toward her father. Rachel had converted an executive conference room into homework space, but the gesture felt inadequate under Lily's scrutiny. Hi, Lily, I'm Rachel. Your dad is helping me with a computer problem. The little girl's response was polite but cold. Hello, Miss Morgan. The formality created distance, made clear that Lily saw Rachel as threat rather than friend. Rachel tried asking about school, about homework, about favorite subjects. Lily gave minimal answers, each one a small rejection of Rachel's attempts at connection. When Rachel offered to order Lily's favorite food, the girl's response shut down that avenue completely. Whatever Daddy says is okay. While Marcus worked with the security team in the war room, identifying the authentication protocol vulnerability and implementing fixes, Rachel sat in the conference room with a 6-year-old who wanted nothing to do with her. Every attempt at conversation died quickly. Every question received answers designed to end rather than continue dialogue. Maya Chen appeared with pizza an hour into the ordeal, taking pity on her boss's obvious floundering. Sometimes kids need space. Let her come to you instead of pushing. But space felt like failure, and Rachel had built her life around refusing to fail at anything. She returned to the war room where Marcus was teaching engineers how to prevent similar vulnerabilities, his expertise on full display in ways that made Brad Morrison's resentment palpable. The team that had mocked Marcus days before now hung on his explanations, recognizing mastery when it was demonstrated. The fix took 90 minutes. Marcus returned to the conference room where Lily had completed her homework and was drawing pictures with colored pencils Maya had found somewhere. Rachel sat nearby with her laptop, trying to work but mostly watching a 6-year-old who represented everything Rachel had never allowed herself to want. Marcus's face transformed, seeing his daughter safe and occupied. Pure love radiating from someone who'd lost so much, but still had the one thing that mattered. Daddy, did you fix the computers again? We fixed them together. It's always teamwork. In the car going home, Lily asked the question that had been building all evening. Is Miss Morgan your boss now? Are you going to stop being a janitor? Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter. I don't know, sweetheart. Things might change, but we'll figure it out together. Lily was quiet for several blocks. I don't think I like her very much. Marcus's heart sank, recognizing the complication his daughter's opinion represented. Lily's acceptance mattered more than any salary increase or job title. More than the attraction he was trying very hard not to acknowledge whenever Rachel looked at him with those eyes that suggested she might be capable of seeing him as more than a problem to solve. Over the following weeks, a pattern developed. Marcus consulted on technical problems while maintaining his janitorial position, unwilling to surrender the stability it represented. Rachel offered him a formal role as technical consultant at $85,000 annually, but Marcus insisted on keeping both positions until he could trust that the consulting wouldn't evaporate. The arrangement made no organizational sense, but it worked with effectiveness that defied conventional hierarchy. Maya Chen became a bridge between Marcus and the engineering team, championing his contributions while running interference against Brad Morrison's faction, who resented a janitor showing them up. Late-night work sessions brought Marcus and Rachel together in ways that felt dangerous and inevitable. Side by side at whiteboards, they would solve problems with a synchronicity that made other engineers exchange knowing looks. Rachel provided business context while Marcus brought technical depth. They finished each other's sentences, thought in parallel, created solutions neither could have generated alone. One night, working past midnight on a particularly stubborn bug, their hands brushed reaching for the same marker. Electric currents seemed to pass between them, both pulling back as if burned. Sorry, don't be. The moment stretched, neither moving, both aware of crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed without consequences. Marcus's phone buzzed with a call from Lily, homesick at a sleepover. He stepped away to comfort her, and the spell broke. Rachel watched him talk to his daughter with patience and warmth she'd never seen anyone display, and something in her chest ached with wanting she couldn't afford to feel. Harrison Blake hired a private investigator to research how the Apollo crisis had actually been resolved. The investigation revealed Marcus's academic background, his Berkeley papers, his abandoned doctorate. Blake compiled a dossier with the thoroughness of someone building a weapon, waiting for the right moment to deploy it. Lily's 7th birthday arrived in early April. Marcus planned modest celebrations within his budget, cupcakes at school, small gifts, dinner at Chuck E. Cheese. Rachel wanted to give Lily something meaningful but had no framework for understanding what a 7-year-old might want. Maya suggested science equipment since Lily loved learning, and Rachel bought an $800 telescope with equipment that seemed appropriate for someone interested in space. The birthday dinner at Marcus's apartment was the first time Rachel saw how they lived. The worn furniture and thrift store appliances. The spotless cleanliness that couldn't hide poverty's marks. The photos of Emily that Marcus kept visible because Lily deserved to know her mother. Lily's response to the telescope was lukewarm at best. Polite thanks followed by setting it aside with visible discomfort. Rachel's heart sank, understanding she'd misjudged badly. The gift was too expensive. Too much, creating obligation rather than joy. After Lily went to bed, Rachel helped clean up, her hands in dishwater for probably the first time in years. Marcus stood beside her drying plates, and the domesticity felt surreal. She'll come around, just needs time. What if she doesn't? I don't know how to connect with her. I've never been around children. The admission cost her something. Rachel Morgan admitting inadequacy, admitting she didn't know how to do something important. Neither do I really. We're both making it up as we go. Their hands touched in the dishwater, and this time neither pulled away. They stood in that tiny kitchen with its cracked linoleum and outdated appliances, hands linked, facing uncertainty together. The quarterly board meeting arrived with the inevitability of Judgment Day. Blake's presentation was thorough and devastating. He revealed that the janitor who'd saved Apollo possessed a PhD-level background Marcus had never disclosed, displayed the timeline from promising researcher to service worker, implying that Rachel's management was so poor she hadn't noticed exceptional talent for 5 years. The board erupted with questions Rachel couldn't answer without throwing Marcus under the bus or accepting full blame for incompetence. Blake moved for a vote of no confidence, 4 board members supporting him immediately. Marcus watched from the maintenance office on a monitor Maya had set up, seeing Rachel's face as accusations mounted. He braced for the betrayal he knew was coming, the pragmatic choice that would save her career at his expense. But Rachel didn't deflect. She owned every failure, then pivoted to strategy. Marcus Hayes represents exactly the thinking this company needs. Intelligence doesn't care about job titles. My job is recognizing exceptional talent wherever I find it and creating conditions where it flourishes. The vote split 4-4-3. Blake's motion tabled for 60 days. Rachel survived, but barely, probation hanging over her like a guillotine waiting to drop. The story leaked to media within hours. Tech journalists hungry for unusual narratives seized on the janitor saves company angle. Marcus's privacy evaporated in heat of public attention. Reporters appeared at Lily's school. Photographers staked out their apartment parking lot. LinkedIn connection requests flooded in by thousands. Lily came home crying, overwhelmed by questions from classmates about their poverty, about her dead mother, about why her father cleaned toilets if he was so smart. Marcus held her while fury built in his chest at what visibility had cost them. Rachel hired security to watch their apartment in Lily's school without asking Marcus first, assuming her resources gave her the right to make decisions about his daughter's safety. When Marcus discovered the security guard in the parking lot, he went straight to Rachel's office. "You don't make decisions about my daughter's safety without asking me. Someone had to do something. You were too proud to ask for help." The fight revealed fault lines neither wanted to acknowledge. Marcus's inability to accept help. Rachel's need to control everything. Both recognizing they were arguing about more than security, about feelings neither was ready to name. Lily's resistance hardened. She blamed Rachel for the disruption to their peaceful invisibility. Told Marcus that before Rachel appeared, they were okay. Now everything was ruined. The 7-year-old's ultimatum was clear. "If you marry her, I'll run away." Marcus knew the choice he had to make. His daughter's happiness versus his heart. No contest. Lily was everything. The next day, he went to Rachel's office. "We need professional boundaries. This isn't working." "What are you saying?" "Sophie comes first. Always. My relationship with you, whatever it is hurting her." Rachel's face crumpled before she caught herself. "So you're ending this? Ending us? There is no us to end. You're my boss. I'm your employee. That's all this can be. I have to mean it. Because if I don't, I lose the only thing that matters." He left before she could respond, before his resolve cracked. Rachel sat alone in her office and cried for the second time in her adult life, understanding that some things couldn't be fixed with money or determination or sheer force of will. Marcus drove home with hands shaking, knowing he'd made the right choice and hating himself for how much it hurt. 2 weeks of professional distance felt like years. Marcus maintained his dual role, consulting on technical problems while pushing his janitorial cart through corridors that suddenly seemed longer. Rachel communicated through Maya Chen when coordination was required, avoiding direct contact that might blur the boundaries Marcus had established. They passed each other twice in hallways, exchanged nods that carried the weight of everything unsaid, and continued in opposite directions. Harrison Blake chose a steakhouse in downtown Minneapolis for the meeting, the kind of establishment where entrees cost what Marcus spent on groceries for a month. The venture capitalist sat in a leather booth that probably cost more than Marcus's Honda, silver hair perfectly styled, expression radiating the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. Come work for my venture portfolio companies. I've got 3 firms that need someone with your expertise. Marcus sipped water, uncomfortable in the dress shirt he'd borrowed from Tom Chen because his own collared shirts had seen better decades. $250,000 base salary, equity package in all 3 companies, full benefits including a pre-funded college account for Lily, $50,000 deposited the day you sign. The numbers hit Marcus like physical blows. $250,000 would erase his medical debt within a year, would move Lily to a better school district, would mean actual savings, security, the kind of stability he hadn't known since Emily's diagnosis. Rachel Sterling is going down. Board will remove her in 60 days. When that happens, Titan collapses or gets sold for parts. You'll be unemployed again. Blake leaned forward, shark eyes gleaming. She doesn't care about you, Marcus. You're a pawn in her game to save her CEO position. The moment you're no longer useful, you're gone. I'm offering you respect. Real opportunity. Think about your daughter. Marcus set down his water glass with careful precision. I am thinking about my daughter, about what I'm teaching her every day by the choices I make. Blake's smile faded. Lily's learning from me, watching every decision. If I betray someone for money, what am I teaching her? That integrity is for sale? That loyalty doesn't matter when the price is right? He stood, feeling lighter than he'd felt in weeks despite Blake's obvious fury. My daughter deserves a father she can be proud of, not a rich man with no principles. Good men don't betray good people for money. I'll find another way. I always do. Walking out felt like shedding weight he hadn't known he was carrying. The money would have solved every problem except the one that mattered. Being able to look Lily in the eyes knowing he had chosen right over easy. Tom Chen called that evening while Marcus was helping Lily with the homework, asking if they could meet for coffee. The senior engineer had become something between friend and mentor over the past weeks, bridging the gap between Marcus's janitor existence and technical consultant reality. They met at a diner near Marcus's apartment, the kind of place where coffee came in chipped mugs and refills were automatic. Tom waited until they'd both ordered before getting to the point. I heard about Blake's offer. Tech community's small. Word travels. Marcus wasn't surprised. Silicon Valley North operated on gossip and rumor as much as code and capital. I almost took a job at a competitor 10 years ago. Better money, better title, all the things that look good on paper. Tom stirred sugar into coffee he'd drink black anyway. Old habit from military days. But I would have hated myself. Would have betrayed people who believed in me when nobody else did. You know what I learned? Money isn't everything. Integrity is something. And your daughter's watching how you handle this. The words settled into Marcus's chest with the resonance of truth spoken by someone who'd walked similar paths. Kids are smarter than we think. Lily wants you happy, not rich, happy. There's a difference, Diron. Marcus thought about Lily's face when he'd come home upset after ending things with Rachel. The 7-year-old's concern had been for his emotional state, not their financial situation. And Rachel? She's changed because of you. Don't throw that away. You're not just a brilliant engineer, Marcus. You're a good man. That's rarer. Good men don't betray people for money. They find a third way. The third way revealed itself through Lily's observation 3 days later. Marcus had been moving through the apartment with the kind of mechanical efficiency that suggested functioning without feeling. Lily noticed what adults worked hard to ignore. Are you sad because of Miss Morgan? Marcus tried deflecting, but Lily pressed with the persistence that made her both wonderful and exhausting. Daddy, you told me to always tell the truth. Are you telling the truth now? The question trapped him between the lesson he tried teaching and the example he was currently failing to set. Yes, I'm sad, but you're more important than my feelings. Lily sat with this for a moment, face scrunched in concentration. What if I was wrong about her? The words surprised Marcus enough that he stopped pretending to organize the bookshelf. I've been thinking, the telescope. She didn't have to get me that. And she looked really sad when I didn't like her. Like when I'm mean to kids at school and feel bad after. Marcus knelt to Lily's eye level, giving her the full attention this conversation deserved. You taught me that being brave means doing hard things. Maybe I need to be brave and give her another chance. Where had this come from? What had shifted in his daughter's 7-year-old understanding of the world? You taught me another thing too. Everyone deserves second chances. Even me when I'm mean to you. So maybe Miss Morgan deserves a second chance too. Marcus felt tears threaten, pride mixing with something that might have been hope. Only if you really want to. I won't force anything. I want you to be happy, Daddy. When she was here, you smiled more. You sang in the morning. I miss that. The observation was so acute it physically hurt. Marcus hadn't realized he'd stopped singing while making breakfast, stopped humming during evening routines. Hadn't recognized how deeply his unhappiness had penetrated their household until Lily pointed it out. Can we invite her to dinner? I want to show her I'm sorry, and I want to show her how the telescope works. We've been looking at Jupiter, and I drew pictures. Marcus pulled his daughter into a hug that lasted longer than strictly necessary. Are you sure? I'm sure. Plus, if you marry her someday, I want to already like her. That seems important. The call to Rachel required 3 attempts before Marcus actually pressed send. His hands shook holding the phone, rehearsing and abandoning various approaches before settling on simplicity. Lily wants to invite you to dinner. At our place. Tomorrow night, if you're free. Rachel's voice came through with barely controlled emotion. I'm free. I'll be there. What time? 6:30? I'll bring dessert. And Marcus? Thank you. The preparation consumed the next day with intensity that suggested this dinner mattered more than any meal in recent history. Lily cleaned the apartment with precision that would have impressed military inspectors, arranging furniture and straightening pillows with the gravity of someone preparing for visiting dignitaries. Marcus cooked Emily's lasagna recipe, the one she'd perfected during happier times, sharing it now feeling like blessing from the past toward potential future. Rachel arrived wearing jeans and a Minnesota Wild hockey sweatshirt that looked borrowed or purchased specifically for this occasion. The transformation from power suits to casual wear was jarring, humanizing in ways Marcus wasn't prepared for. She carried a bakery box and flowers, daisies, simple and unpretentious. Lily answered the door after taking a visible breath for courage. Hi, Rachel. Thank you for coming. The use of first name rather than Miss Morgan represented olive branch extended with 7-year-old diplomacy. Rachel knelt to Lily's level, meeting her eyes with respect that acknowledged the significance of this invitation. Thank you for inviting me, Lily. I brought chocolate cake. Maya told me that's your favorite. Lily's face brightened at this evidence of Rachel paying attention, of caring enough to get details right. I'm sorry I was mean about the telescope. It's really cool. Daddy and I used it to look at Jupiter, and I drew you pictures. She presented crayon drawings of what Jupiter might look like up close, complete with the red spot and colorful bands. Rachel accepted them like precious artifacts, genuine tears forming. These are beautiful. Can I keep them? Lily nodded, shy smile breaking through wariness. Yeah, I made them for you. Something fundamental shifted in that moment. Rachel seeing Lily as a person rather than obstacle. Lily seeing Rachel as someone capable of caring rather than just another adult disrupting their peace. Dinner conversation flowed easier than Marcus had dared hope. Lily showed Rachel her science project for the upcoming school fair, a volcano that would demonstrate chemical reactions. Rachel engaged with genuine interest, suggesting improvements without condescension. Have you tried adding dish soap to the lava mixture? Makes it foam better and last longer. Lily's eyes widened. Really? Can we try? After we eat, I'll show you the ratios. The easy competence Rachel displayed with chemistry surprised Marcus until he remembered she'd built a technology company from nothing. Of course she understood science. Of course she could speak Lily's language when she bothered trying. Rachel admitted to struggles that made her human in ways Lily could understand. I was terrible at presentations when I was your age. Threw up before everyone. Really? But you're so important. Being important doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway. The echo of Marcus's own lesson about bravery wasn't lost on Lily. She looked at her father with expressions suggesting pieces were clicking into place. That's what Daddy says. About being brave? Your dad's a very wise man. After dinner, they moved to the worn couch that had seen better decades. Rachel helped Lily set up the telescope by the window, both of them working together to calibrate and focus. Marcus made coffee, watching from the kitchen, while two people he cared about found common ground in the night sky. Rachel named constellations with the precision of someone who'd studied them seriously. Orion's Belt, Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper pointing toward Polaris. Lily absorbed the information with hunger for knowledge that reminded Marcus painfully of himself at that age. His phone buzzed with a text from Blake. Final offer, $300K, expires midnight. Marcus deleted it without responding. Some decisions didn't require reconsideration. Leaving Rachel's apartment that night, Lily grabbed both their hands, swinging between them like a bridge connecting separate shores. This was fun. Can we do it again? Rachel looked at Marcus over Lily's head, hope and fear warring in her expression. I'd like that very much. If your dad says it's okay. Daddy? Marcus felt the last of his resistance crumble. Yeah, we can do it again. Harrison Blake's hostile takeover announcement hit the tech news feeds on a Friday afternoon. Tender offer at $45 per share, 30% premium over current trading price. The offer would remain open for 72 hours, giving shareholders until Monday morning to decide Titan's fate. Rachel convened an emergency board meeting within the hour. Blake's faction supported the acquisition. Her loyalists resisted. The three swing voters were doing exactly that, swinging toward whichever option seemed most financially advantageous. But due diligence revealed a complication Blake either hadn't discovered or didn't care about. Apollo 2.0, the next-generation platform Titan was preparing to launch, had a critical security vulnerability, the kind that could expose all client data, trigger class action lawsuits, destroy any value Blake thought he was acquiring. Rachel understood the calculus with brutal clarity. If Apollo 2.0 launched with this flaw, shareholders would sell to Blake at any price. If she could fix it before Monday's vote, she had a chance to make the case for independent future. Fixing it required expertise she didn't have, required the one person who'd proven capable of seeing what entire teams missed, required asking for help from someone she'd hurt, who had every reason to refuse. She went to Marcus's apartment at 9 p.m. on Friday, knocking on the door with humility that felt foreign but necessary. Marcus answered, surprised to see her standing in the hallway of Riverside Apartments, where she clearly didn't belong. I need your help. Titan needs your help. But more than that, I need you. The admission cost her every ounce of pride she'd built her identity around. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside to let her in. Lily was already in pajamas, ready for bed, but curious about the unexpected visitor. Rachel explained the situation in terms a 7-year-old could grasp. Computers were sick again. Needed Daddy's special skills to get better. Can I come too? I want to help. Marcus looked at Rachel, who nodded immediately. Absolutely. We'll set you up with homework space and all the pizza you can eat. The war room at 10 p.m. on a Friday night felt different than during business hours. Quieter, more intimate. The skeleton crew Rachel had assembled included Tom Chen, Maya, and 4 other engineers who'd proven themselves trustworthy. No Brad Morrison. No executives who might leak to Blake. The problem was worse than initial assessments suggested. The quantum encryption protocol had a backdoor vulnerability that wouldn't just expose client data. It would allow complete system compromise. Fixing it required rewriting fundamental architecture. 60 hours of work compressed into 58 before shareholders voted. Marcus stepped into leadership naturally, assigning tasks based on strengths he'd observed over months of quiet attention. Tom Chen handled back-end restructuring. Maya coordinated communication with the broader engineering team who'd arrived Saturday morning. Others tackled specific components Marcus identified as critical path. He and Rachel worked side by side at the main whiteboard, sketching solutions with the synchronicity of people who thought in complementary patterns. She provided business context, client requirements, regulatory constraints, competitive pressures. He brought technical depth, algorithmic approaches, security protocols, optimization strategies. Somewhere around midnight, they broke for coffee. Rachel found herself alone with Marcus in the break room, while others scattered to various workstations. I never thanked you for not taking Blake's offer. How did you know about that? Maya told me. She's protective of you. We both are. Marcus poured 2 cups of coffee with the precision of someone who'd done this thousands of times. I couldn't betray you, not after everything. Is that the only reason? Marcus met her eyes, no longer hiding what he felt. No, it's not. I have feelings for you, Rachel. Terrifying, complicated feelings that I've been trying to ignore because of Lily and because of how badly this could end. Rachel's breath caught. I have those feelings too. Have had them since you showed me what grace looks like. Since you taught me that kindness matters more than winning. Maya's voice interrupted from the doorway. Sorry to interrupt the moment, but we've got a breakthrough on the encryption rewrite. The moment passed, but the words remained, hanging between them like promise neither was quite ready to formalize. Saturday's marathon saw the team working through breakfast, lunch, and dinner that arrived via delivery services charging premium rates. Marcus brought Lily to the office mid-morning, unable to leave her alone at home for the hours this required. She set up in the same conference room where she'd done homework before, this time with books and art supplies Rachel had Maya purchase. During a break, Rachel sat with Lily while Marcus consulted on a particularly thorny implementation detail. The 7-year-old was working on math homework, struggling with fractions. Can I help? Lily looked up, suspicious still but less hostile than before. I don't understand how 1/2 plus 1/3 equals 5/6. It should equal 2/5. Rachel grabbed a piece of paper, drew circles divided into sections. Imagine you have a pizza. Half of it is pepperoni, a third is sausage. How much is covered with meat? She shaded the sections, showing how the fractions combined once converted to common denominators. See? You need the same size pieces to add them together, like needing the same language to talk to someone. Understanding dawned on Lily's face, followed by something that might have been respect. You're good at explaining things. I used to tutor students when I was in college. Needed money for rent. Turns out teaching is harder than learning. Lily studied her for a moment. You really like my dad, don't you? The direct question was so characteristic of Lily that Rachel had to smile. Yes, very much. Is that okay with you? Lily's face grew serious in the way children's faces do when they're processing complex emotions. He's been alone for a long time, since Mommy died. I don't remember her much, but Daddy talks about her sometimes. He says she would want him to be happy. She pulled a photo from her backpack, worn from handling. Emily Hayes smiled from the picture, blonde hair and kind eyes that Lily had inherited. I think Mommy would like you, because you're smart like her, and you make Daddy smile. Rachel's eyes filled with tears she couldn't stop. You can love my daddy, but you have to promise something. Anything. Promise you won't leave us. Promise if you love us, you stay. Because I can't lose another mommy. The raw vulnerability in those words broke something in Rachel's chest. She pulled Lily into a hug that the girl returned after brief hesitation. I promise. I promise, Lily. I'm not going anywhere. Marcus appeared in the doorway, having witnessed the exchange. The expression on his face suggested he'd just watched his two worlds merge in ways he'd thought impossible. Sunday at 4 a.m., the final code was complete. Testing phase commenced with everyone too exhausted to feel the anxiety they'd felt at the beginning. Security audits ran while engineers dozed at workstations. Penetration tests probed for weaknesses. Stress tests pushed systems to breaking points. 6 a.m. Sunday morning, all tests passed. Apollo 2.0 wasn't just fixed. It was revolutionary. The new encryption protocol was potentially patentable, worth hundreds of millions in licensing fees. Marcus had not only saved the company again, he'd made it exponentially more valuable. The team celebrated with quiet exhaustion, too tired for exuberance. Rachel addressed them with gratitude that felt inadequate. You just saved this company. Every single one of you. Marcus deflected credit toward her leadership, but everyone in the room knew the truth. They'd followed his vision, executed his architecture, brought his solutions to life. As others left to sleep before Monday's shareholder meeting, Marcus and Rachel remained in the war room, surrounded by whiteboards covered in equations and architectural diagrams that represented hours of collaborative brilliance. We make a good team. The best. Rachel stepped closer, and this time there were no phones buzzing, no crises demanding attention, no reasons to pull away. They kissed with the desperation of people who'd been denying themselves too long, the sweetness of connection finally acknowledged. Lily's voice came from the doorway where she stood with her backpack, Maya having brought her back from the apartment where she'd been sleeping. "It's about time. Can we go home now? I'm tired, and you guys are being gross." They broke apart, laughing at the 7-year-old's perfect timing. Lily grinned at them with satisfaction, suggesting she'd orchestrated more than they'd realized. Monday morning arrived with all the ceremony of Judgment Day. The shareholder meeting convened in Titan's auditorium, 200 people in person, plus hundreds more via webcast. Harrison Blake sat in the front row with the confidence of someone who'd counted votes and knew he'd won. Rachel's presentation was thorough. Apollo 2.0's breakthrough, the new encryption protocol, patent-pending technology worth potentially $500 million in licensing revenue, financial projections showing exponential growth if shareholders held rather than sold. If you sell to Blake, you're selling at the bottom. If you hold, you're positioned for exponential growth that makes today's share price look like a bargain. Blake's counter was predictable and devastating. "Nice technology, but can you execute? Your leadership has been questioned by your own board. The Janitor scandal suggests fundamental problems with management oversight. Rachel Sterling lacks the judgment to lead this company into its next phase. Take the premium I'm offering, and while it's still on the table," the audience murmured. Shareholders doing mental math on guaranteed profits versus uncertain futures. Marcus stood from where he'd been sitting in the back row. Rachel hadn't known he'd come, had assumed he'd be home sleeping after the all-nighter. But there he was, walking toward the front of the auditorium with Lily holding his hand. "May I address the shareholders?" Rachel nodded, too surprised to speak. "My name is Marcus Hayes. Some of you know me as the janitor who saved the company during the Apollo crisis. That's partially true. I was a janitor. I'm also someone with a PhD-level background in machine learning from UC Berkeley." He spoke without notes, voice steady despite obvious nerves. "I was a janitor because I was a broke, desperate single father taking any job that would feed my daughter. Not because I lacked capability, but because I lacked options. Rachel Sterling could have ignored me, kept me invisible. Instead, she recognized my potential and gave me a chance to contribute at my highest level. She's not perfect. She's made mistakes, but she learns from them. She grows. She becomes better. That's the kind of leader you want. Someone who can evolve, who values talent over titles, who creates conditions where brilliance can flourish regardless of where it comes from." Lily squeezed his hand, pride radiating from every inch of her 7-year-old frame. "Vote for Blake if you want short-term profit. Vote for Rachel if you want long-term vision that will make this company something truly revolutionary." He sat down, hands shaking, while the auditorium processed what they just heard. Blake's face had gone crimson with suppressed fury. The vote wasn't even close. 68% of shareholders rejected Blake's offer. 78% voted confidence in Rachel's continued leadership. Blake stormed out before results were official, his faction dissolving like smoke. Rachel's victory speech focused on people rather than profits. She announced the Titan Scholars Program, providing education benefits for all employees, regardless of position. Dedicated it to everyone like Marcus who had untapped potential waiting for opportunity. Media coverage flipped overnight. Rachel Sterling's inspiring comeback. The janitor PhD who saved a company. Stories of second chances and recognizing worth beyond appearances. 6 months passed in a blur of stability Marcus had almost forgotten was possible. His promotion to VP of AI research came with salary that made medical debt disappear and student loans manageable. They moved to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. Nothing extravagant, but clean and warm with space for Lily to have her own room. Thanksgiving dinner was chaotic and perfect. Rachel's sister Emily drove in from Portland with her husband and 2 kids, the reconciliation Rachel had worked months to achieve. Tom Chen stopped by with his family. Maya brought her parents. The mixing of worlds that had seemed impossible now felt natural, inevitable. Lily observed it all with the wisdom children sometimes displayed. "I used to think family had to look a certain way, but family is who shows up, who stays, who loves you even when it's hard." Rachel squeezed her hand, this child who'd become hers through choice rather than biology. 1 year after the war room crisis that changed everything, Marcus took Rachel to the maintenance break room where she'd first apologized. She was confused by the location until he explained. This is where you first showed me grace, where you apologized when you didn't have to. I fell in love with you that day, even though I didn't know it yet. I thought my life was over when Emily died, thought I'd never feel whole again. You didn't complete me, I was already complete, but you expanded me, showed me it's possible to honor the past while embracing the future. He pulled out a ring, simple platinum band with small diamond he'd saved 6 months to afford. Rachel Morgan, you've been patient with Lily, patient with me, patient with this messy, complicated situation. I don't have much to offer beyond a daughter with strong opinions and a heart that's been broken, but still works. Will you marry me? Rachel cried for the third time in her adult life, joy overwhelming the control she'd spent decades perfecting. You have everything to offer: integrity, compassion, brilliance, and the best daughter in the world. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Lily appeared from around the corner where she'd been hiding, running to embrace them both. Finally, I've been waiting forever. You knew? Daddy, you're terrible at keeping secrets. I helped pick the ring, had to make sure it was pretty enough. Rachel laughed through tears, holding both of them, understanding that some families were built rather than born. The wedding took place in early September at a historic inn outside St. Paul. 50 guests, carefully chosen from the two worlds that had merged over the past year. Tom Chen stood as best man. Maya served as maid of honor. Emily's sister had flown in with her family, the reconciliation complete enough for her to witness this new beginning. Lily wore a white dress from Target that she'd insisted on choosing herself, declaring that expensive didn't mean better. She walked the aisle with exaggerated seriousness, scattering autumn leaves with the precision of someone performing sacred duty. When she reached the front, she took her position between Marcus and Rachel, exactly where she belonged. Rachel's vows were simple and devastating. Marcus, you taught me that brilliance comes in unexpected packages. That kindness matters more than winning. You and Lily gave me a family when I'd accepted I'd never have one. I promise to spend my life honoring that gift. I promise to love you both with everything I am. Marcus spoke with voice that broke only once. Rachel, I loved Emily with all my heart. She gave me Lily, the greatest gift of my life. I thought my heart had closed permanently. You showed me it's possible to honor the past while embracing the future. You fierce, brilliant woman who learned to love a janitor. I promise to build with you the life we both thought was impossible. After the official vows, Lily pulled out a sign she'd made, hand-lettered with careful 7-year-old precision. Now we're all together forever. The officiant smiled. I think Lily has something she'd like to say. Lily had practiced this moment, rehearsed it with Marcus dozens of times. She turned to Rachel with seriousness that made the entire room hold its breath. Rachel, can I call you Mom? Rachel dropped to her knees, pulling Lily into an embrace that lasted long enough for most guests to need tissues. Years of loneliness, of wondering if she'd ever have this, of believing she'd traded family for success, all of it dissolved in the arms of a 7-year-old who'd chosen to love her. Marcus joined the embrace, 3 people becoming one family under September sun. The reception featured toasts that revealed the journey. Tom Chen spoke about learning to see beyond job titles. Maya talked about recognizing worth wherever it appeared. Emily, Rachel's sister, spoke about second chances mattering at any age. 1 year later, Marcus woke at 4:45 a.m. out of habit that 5 years of stability hadn't broken. But now Rachel slept beside him, her breathing steady in the darkness of their modest house. Lily had her own room decorated with planets and stars. The golden retriever they'd adopted from the shelter slept at the foot of their bed. He went to the kitchen, started coffee in a machine that didn't require special button sequences. The bills on the counter were manageable, paid on time, no longer sources of existential terror. Photos covered every surface: wedding pictures, family trips to places they could now afford, Lily's science fair victories. A new photo sat in a frame on the counter. Ultrasound image labeled Baby Hayes Morgan, due April. Rachel appeared, pregnant belly visible beneath his old Berkeley sweatshirt she'd claimed as her own. She stole his coffee cup with the casual intimacy of someone who knew he'd just pour another. They stood at the window watching snow fall over their neighborhood. breath-forming clouds in the cold air seeping through old window seals they'd fix come spring. Do you ever think about where we'd be if you hadn't fixed that system? Every day, I'd still be invisible, still alone except for Lily. You were never alone. You had her. True, but I didn't have you. Didn't have this. She leaned into him, and he wrapped arms around her growing belly. I definitely wouldn't have you. I'd be alone in some penthouse, married to my work, slowly turning into everything I swore I'd never become. You were never a monster, just lost. You found me. We found each other. Lily appeared in the doorway, sleep-tousled and clutching Peanut the elephant. Why are you guys up so early? Couldn't sleep. Too excited about today. Today was Bring Your Parents to STEM Career Day at Lily's school. Both her parents were scientists. She'd been planning her presentation for weeks. They ate breakfast together, a family scene that had once seemed impossible now rendered ordinary through repetition. Radio played news about Titan Systems announcing record quarterly earnings, credited to culture of recognizing talent regardless of traditional metrics. Marcus smirked. Your PR team's getting better. It's true, though. We did change the culture. You changed. That changed everything. Leaving for school, Marcus insisted they take the reliable used SUV Rachel had purchased after the pregnancy announcement. But he'd kept the old Honda. For Lily when she turned 16. Teach her that nothing is beneath her. That dignity lives in how you treat your work, not what the work is. Lily's backpack carried the same stickers that had once decorated Marcus's janitorial cart, plus new ones. Family photos, best family ever proclamations in 7-year-old handwriting. Dad, when the baby comes, can I teach them about science? Of course, you'll be an amazing big sister. Mom, will you still have time for my homework? Always, you're my priority. Both of you are. Lily, satisfied, skipped ahead to the car. Marcus and Rachel watched their daughter, hands linked between them. Thank you. For what? For seeing me. For giving Lily a mother. For being brave enough to change. Thank you for teaching me what actually matters. For showing me that success isn't measured in stock prices or quarterly earnings. What's it measured in? Rachel looked at Lily, touched her belly where new life grew. This, right here, this is success. They drove toward an ordinary miracle of an ordinary day. 3 becoming 4, past and future merging into present, that felt like gift Marcus had stopped believing he deserved. The janitor who was never just a janitor. The CEO who learned to be human. The daughter who taught them both what brave really means. In the language of family, redemption, and love, transcending every artificial boundary, they had found their way. Not to perfection, but to something better. Acceptance of each other's flaws, commitment to growth, and recognition that worth couldn't be measured by job titles or bank accounts. Only by the lives we touched and the love we gave. The ordinary miracle was enough. It was everything.